In a forest during a rainstorm, a young girl named Alicia is walking alone. She eventually comes across some stone ruins to take shelter from the storm, and after resting until daylight, she notices a mural. The mural depicts a hero known as the Shepherd, brandishing a sacred sword. She takes out a book and reads about a sacred place, the capital of the Seraphim, and a story of how the Shepherd will cleanse the world of darkness, wielding the might of the Seraphim. Alicia calls the story folklore, as she seems to believe the world is already beyond saving. All the while, a small strange creature, a Norman, seems to be trying to grab her attention, but the Norman is invisible to her. Suddenly, a swarm of bugs attacks Alicia, and the Norman attempts to protect her. Alicia tries to escape by breaking down a nearby wall and falls into a tunneled aqueduct. She slides down into a pool of water and sinks to the bottom. However, instead of touching the floor, she falls through the water into a hallway. With the water suspended above her, she continues through the hall and eventually comes upon a field of flowers next to a waterfall, where she finds a small stone monument with the mark of the Shepherd engraved on it. When she touches the stone, it moves toward the waterfall, shines brightly, and opens a path. Meanwhile, two boys, Soray and Mikleo, are jumping across the cliffside high above the clouds. They stumble upon some ruins themselves and take a closer look. While exploring the ruins, Soray comes upon an illusory wall, which they note was obviously set up by their Gramps. Their Gramps, Master Zenris, suddenly shows up and forbids them from exploring beyond the wall. They all then head back home, but curious about the place beyond the wall, Soray reads from his book, The Celestial Record. They conclude that the area beyond the wall is probably the celestial capital, where humans and seraphim lived in harmony. Mikleo also points out that the area was beyond Zenris's protective domain, making it even more interesting. So Soray and Mikleo both let curiosity get the better of them, do their secret handshake, and race each other to the ruins. Soray arrives first, discovering a strange glove with the mark of the Shepherd. At the same time, Alicia is also headed deeper into the ruins, entering the protective domain. She is then nearly struck by lightning from a statue and falls to the lower floor. Up above, Soray and Mikleo are also attacked by lightning. They do their best to avoid getting hit, but eventually fall into a pit, entering the same temple that Alicia fell into. Thanks to Mikleo's water magic, they are unharmed, but they find Alicia unconscious near some rubble and decide to go to help her. They cross a hidden bridge to reach Alicia, and after some uncertainty, they wake her up. She immediately asks Soray if he is the Shepherd of legend, but he tells her that he is not. Though despondent, she follows Soray and Mikleo out of the ruins. But they notice that Alicia can't see Mikleo, which confirms that most humans are actually unable to see Seraphim. Together, they walk to the Seraphim village of Elysium, and once they reach the entrance of the village, Mikleo heads off first to meet Zenris, and Soray attempts to introduce Alicia to the villagers. But Alicia is unable to see the villagers, causing an awkward moment where she pleads with the Seraphim as if they were spirits. Soray and Mikleo then visit Zenris, who warns them that humans bring disaster. Zenris explains that Soray is an exception, being able to see and interact with Seraphim after having lived with them for so long, but Soray has faith that humans and Seraphim will one day live together in harmony again. Though seemingly ambivalent, Zenris allows Alicia to stay until she is ready to leave, so she stays with Soray for a while, sharing stories and eating with him. Alicia reveals that she is from Ladylake, the capital of Hillen, where the Sacred Blade resides. She also tells Soray that the world is in trouble, as the land has become dangerous and calamity strikes often. But Soray tries to cheer her up by giving her a tour of the ruins and tells her that he truly believes in the legends. He offers her the glove he found and asks her to keep faith in the legends. When Alicia is finally ready to leave, she thanks Soray and returns the glove, believing that if the Shepherd were to exist, it would most certainly be someone like him. Suddenly, Zenris notices that someone has invaded his protective domain. Everyone from the village goes on high alert and seeks the invader. Soray and Mikleo discover the invader, a strange foxman, whom they recognize to be a Hellion. Together, they fight the Hellion but seem unable to actually hurt him. The fight is then interrupted by Zenris, and the Hellion decides to leave, stating that he needs to go after his true prey. Later that day, Soray realizes that the Hellion was probably after Alicia and immediately runs after her, but Mikleo intercepts him, having reached the same conclusion. Mikleo reveals that he went back to the ruins where they found Alicia, stumbling upon a dagger with the crest of the royal family. He is aware of Soray's intentions and decides to go with him to save her and return the dagger. And so Soray and Mikleo travel to Ladylake. While waiting to enter the city, a girl with red hair introduces herself to Soray, revealing that she is with a merchant group called the Sparrow Feathers, and that she can help them get inside. Once she helps them through, she demands 500 gold, but Soray doesn't even know what money is, so the girl digs through his bag to see what he has. The red-haired girl discovers the royal family dagger and lets him go, but tells Soray that he owes her before taking her leave. Soray and Mikleo then explore the city, but Mikleo starts to feel sick, saying that the malevolence is strong there. After spending some time recovering, they spot the Foxman Hellion quickly running towards the city rooftops, but Sorey and Mikleo chase after him. Sorey manages to keep up with the Hellion and they face off on the rooftop. But the Foxman reveals that he is no longer interested in taking Alicia's life and that another group is now after her. Meanwhile, Alicia is at the city graveyard speaking to Maltran, her teacher. It seems there are some political tensions and war is about to break out between Helen and its neighbor Roland's, but Princess Alicia wants to take the non-violent approach and will only fight if they are struck first, trying to avoid war as much as possible. This is something that Chancellor Bartlow, one of her opposing politicians, is not happy with, and it seems he has reasons for wanting to start a war, so he hires an assassin group called the Scattered Bones to kill Alicia. The following day, Alicia is hosting the Sacred Blade Festival in a large cathedral. Near the center stands the sacred blade with a white-haired woman laying in front of it. Sorey and Mikleo are also there, and they quickly recognize the woman as the Lady of the Lake, who herself is a seraphim. She waits in front of the sword as warriors attempt to pull it out, but none are able to. The princess tries to reassure the people with a speech, but her adamant stance to take the non-violent approach instills worry among the people. This causes malevolence to build until a spectral Hellion is suddenly formed from within the malevolence, and Hellion goes on a rampage. Seeing an opportunity, Scattered Bones' assassin takes advantage of the chaos to attack Alicia, but she fights the assassin off. Sorey jumps in to help, but Alicia tells him to focus on the source of the chaos as he is the only one who can stop it, so Sorey draws the sacred blade and forms a pact with the Lady of the Lake, who introduces herself as Layla. He calls upon her true name and fuses with her. With his new power, he defeats the Hellion in a single blow and passes out. Upon seeing the circumstances change, the assassin then decides to retreat. Later, Sorey wakes up in a bed with Mikleo and Layla waiting by his side. He discovers that he has been sleeping for 3 days with a high fever, and that Alicia has been taking care of him. Alicia then walks in, relieved to see him well, and they decide to have a meal together. After telling Sorey of the events after the festival, she offers him some new clothing as thanks. Mikleo and Layla comment on his new drip, so Sorey makes a retort, but this causes him to look like a crazy person. This confuses Alicia, but Layla offers to help by communicating with Alicia through Sorey. After some difficulty, Sorey finally manages to help Alicia speak with the Seraphim, which helps her become a true believer. A maid then interrupts and tells Alicia that she is expected at the castle, so Alicia offers to take Sorey outside and drop him off at the castle gates. After dropping Sorey and his Seraphim friends off, Sorey notices that he can now feel the malevolence and that there is a particularly strong presence of it nearby. The trio finds their way to the source, an underground ruin. They explore inside and find a sealed entrance. Being the dungeon exploring veterans they are, Sorey and Mikleo find a way to open the seal with a royal family dagger, and as they venture in, Sorey notices a large and intimidating dragon statue. Mikleo explains that dragons are an ill-omened calamity manifested, which must mean there is something terrible in these ruins. Suddenly, a swarm of Hellionized bats attacks the trio, which they manage to fight off and disperse. But it seems there is more to the malevolence deeper within, and so they go searching. Eventually, they reach a dark and ominous room with skeletons and torture devices laying about, and it seems to be a dungeon, hiding secrets of the royal family that Alicia seems unaware of. Layla explains that the skulls belong to rebels who were slaughtered in secret, and that their negative emotions cause the lingering malevolence. She continues to explain that the shepherd's primary goal is to purify the Lord of Calamity, an entity that produces malevolence so strong it can directly affect the world. Her explanation ends when they notice that the floor is covered in water. They quickly realize they are in danger, and the dungeon begins to collapse on them, as geysers of water spew out from the floor. The three of them quickly escape the dungeon, only to be met with a heavy rainstorm outside. Looking toward the sky, they notice a tornado approaching the city. Sorey, Mikleo, and Layla move to intercept it before it reaches the castle. They see that within the tornado is a dragon, which suddenly disperses before confronting them. Chancellor Bartlow then invites Sorey to have a meal with him as thanks for saving the city. Despite Alicia's concern, Sorey accepts the invitation. However, when Sorey arrives at Chancellor Bartlow's estate, Alicia is told that the king is awaiting her. It appears that Alicia is unwanted. Sorey goes on to meet Bartlow anyway, having a conversation about their future intentions. Chancellor Bartlow wants Sorey to work together with him, but Sorey declines and states that he is going to chase the dragon he saw earlier. Bartlow is Saz, but doesn't seem to mind if the shepherd leaves Laddie Lake for now. So Sorey meets back up with Alicia after the meal, and she tells him that she's going to Marland, where a plague is ravaging the people. Later that night, as Sorey sleeps, Mikleo talks to Layla about feeling powerless to help Sorey, so Layla tells him of a way to help Sorey, of another artifact that he can obtain and use, much in the same way she uses the sacred sword to channel her powers. Intrigued by this, Mikleo decides to go retrieve the artifact on his own. Though Sorey expresses concern about Mikleo going off on his own, he trusts Mikleo and decides he must have good reasons. So Sorey decides to continue his own journey, but meets with Alicia outside. Finally, remembering the dagger he was holding onto this whole time, he returns it to her. She thanks him and asks if he would like to journey together, at least partway through. Sorey agrees, and they talk about dragon legends that might offer him some clues. Alicia mentions a mountainous area called Rayfox Spirit Crest, which is mentioned in multiple dragon legends, and so Sorey decides he will head there after accompanying her. Together, they lead a caravan carrying supplies to Marland, and as they ride together, Alicia asks Sorey to tell her more about Seraphim. Sorey explains that Seraphim used to live in each city as one of the elements earth, wind, water, and fire. But the people eventually lost their reverence toward the Seraphim and began to doubt and fight one another. This makes Alicia suspect that it is human conflict that has created their current circumstance, but they reach no definitive answer. Eventually, their time together comes to an end, and they part ways at Fork to Rayfox Spirit Crest. In the foggy mountain range of Rayfox, Sorey stops when he feels a strong malevolence. They see an umbrella fall, and Sorey catches a young girl that is suddenly thrown at him. Layla quickly recognizes the girl and calls out her name, Edna. Edna and Layla seem to be friends, but their reunion is quickly interrupted by a Hellion. Edna creates pillars of the earth to beat back the Hellion, and Sorey fights with Layla supporting her, but their attacks seem to have little effect as the Hellion's malevolence is quite strong. Then, out of nowhere, a large blue fireball takes the Hellion out in a single strike. A shirtless man with long white hair and a magic pistol reveals himself. Layla also recognizes him as Zavid, and he wields a pistol that has the power to hurt Hellions. They don't get much chance to rest as they are attacked again, but this time by a dragon. It is revealed that Zavid is chasing after that specific dragon, which was once Edna's older brother, Eisen. Sorey tries to fight back, wanting to attempt to purify the dragon, but the Seraphims tell Sorey that a dragon cannot be purified. Not wanting to hurt her brother, Edna stops Zavid from shooting the dragon, so they have no choice but to retreat for now. Meanwhile, at an underwater ruin, Mikleo stumbles across a large bow. As he approaches it, he gets surrounded by 3 centipede-like Hellions. Being unable to purify them with his staff, he attempts to use the bow and discovers that it has the power to defeat Hellions. The scene then returns to Sorey and the other Seraphim as they have successfully hidden from the dragon. When Edna asks Sorey why he came, he explains that he came to learn more about dragons, hopefully finding out more about malevolence from them. However, now he wants to know how he can save them to give Edna back her brother. Edna calls him an idiot and says that dragons can't be saved, but Sorey insists there must be a way. They then hear the dragon's roars and find Zavid fighting the dragon once again. Sorey armatizes with Alicia and joins the fight with Zavid. However, his power is not enough to defeat the dragon and he gets knocked into the cliffside. Edna interrupts in an attempt to reach out to her brother Eisen, and just when it seems like the dragon will kill Edna, it seems to recognize her and stops. Sorey notices this and catches Edna, letting the dragon fly away. Later, they regroup and discuss what happened. Zavid agrees that there might be some hope, so he will hold off on killing Eisen until Edna is ready. Edna, being moved by Sorey's intention to save Eisen, decides to form a sublord contract with him, allowing him to use her powers. Meanwhile, Mikleo is on his way to meet up with Sorey, assuming that Sorey would be headed toward the next great source of malevolence. But on his way through the woods, he spots a Norman being chased by a Hellion. He shoots the Hellion with his bow, saving the Norman. The Norman then returns the favor by powering Mikleo up, allowing Mikleo to blow away the Hellion with a powerful shot. They then rest near a stream and the Norman introduces himself as Atak. Concerned for his safety, Mikleo suggests that Atak should probably leave the forest. The little Norman heeds his advice and joins forces with Mikleo until he finds a new place to stay. Around the same time, Sorey meets up with some soldiers at the fork where Alicia dropped him off. They tell Sorey that the bridge to Marland has been destroyed and offer a horse to catch up to Alicia. It seems that Alicia's route was cut off when the bridge had broken down. The heavy rainstorms also made the rivers too difficult to cross, so she found another bridge at Priver and headed there. But near the first bridge, Sorey meets up with Maltrain and the soldiers that were left behind, where another Hellion has spawned. The Hellion appears to be a giant serpent known as Ouroboros. Sorey takes this chance to fight with his new partner Edna. The fight is quickly interrupted by the appearance of a drake. Layla points out that a drake can still be purified, so Sorey acts quickly and uses the Ouroboros as a giant spring to launch himself at the drake, but the Drake blows him back and flies away. Though a bit frustrated, Sorey waits for the water to calm down so that he can create a bridge using Edna's power and make his way to Marland. In Marland, Alicia has been trying to help the townspeople as they all seem to be suffering from some kind of illness. When Alicia and Sorey meet, they discover that Alicia can now hear the seraphim, suggesting that Sorey's ability has improved. Sorey then senses the Drake, which appears to be headed in the direction of a large holy tree. They conclude that it must be making a nest for its final transformation. Once they reach the Drake, Edna attempts to hold it down as Sorey and Alicia armatize to strike it down, but the Drake breaks the binding and flies into the air, making it difficult for Sorey to take it down. However, with the power of friendship, Mikleo arrives just in time to make a sublord contract with Sorey. They armatize and shoot down the Drake with Mikleo's bow, cleansing the malevolence. Sorey and Mikleo celebrate their victory, return to Marland, and cleans the waters. With the townspeople now safe, the group takes a well-deserved break in the library. Here they speak with Rohan, the Drake they defeated earlier. It turns out that he is a seraphim that succumbed to malevolence, turning him into the Drake they fought with. Rohan does not remember how it happened, he only remembers that it all started with something small. Alicia joins in on the conversation, thanking Sorey and all the seraphim for their help restoring hope to the people, though it will take some time for the ecology to completely recover. Sorey offers to help out more, and though Alicia is concerned about Sorey's condition, she suggests helping distribute supplies to rebuild. Once outside, Alicia gives commands to the soldiers and meets with a merchant caravan. On the caravan, there is a familiar red-haired girl. She is Rose of the Sparrow Feathers, the one who helped Sorey enter Laddie Lake. Rose introduces herself to Alicia and greets Sorey when they notice each other. After teasing Sorey and Alicia for a while, Rose takes her leave to drop off the supplies. Maltran then arrives on the scene with one of Alicia's personal riders. They have grave news. Chancellor Bartlow has ordered troops to march to Glaven Basin, the contested zone between Highland and Rollins. Alicia learns that the upper-rank officers are already preparing for war and a second wave is almost ready. She declares her intention to stop them and Sorey offers to go with her. However, Layla is against the idea that Sorey should go, suggesting that he is not ready for a malevolence that possesses humans. Conveniently, they sense strong malevolence in a dark alley and discover a Helionized human. Sorey attempts to purify the possessed man but falls over in pain when he tries to strike. The Helionized human nearly escapes, but Sorey manages to catch him at the last second. Sorey learns that purifying a human means accepting their malevolence into himself. Having absorbed the memories of the person he purified, he then walks toward the cemetery, stopping at a specific gravestone and purifying it. Meanwhile, in a different location, Alicia is ambushed by the Scattered Bones assassins. The leader of the assassins attacks Alicia, testing her resolve and beliefs. The assassin finally relents when Alicia stakes her life on her ideals, pointing the assassin's dagger at her own neck. Alicia isn't finished, however, as she cuts off the assassin's mask and demands their assistance. The assassin is revealed to be Rose, the Sparrow Feather merchant, and she agrees to help. The following day, Sorey, Alicia, and the others all head toward the basin. Their intentions are to intercept both the Highland and Roland's forces to prevent them from fighting. But unbeknownst to Alicia, Highland forces near the basin are already plotting a surprise attack, hiding their forces within a foggy mist. Yet, it is the Roland's forces that strike first, attacking the Highland forces from the rear. This means that Roland's first snuck their forces in, making them the aggressors. Alicia and her forces were too late to stop the fighting, so she decides to confront the Highland General Landon instead. Sorey chooses to do what he can, making his way toward the fighting. He observes the battle atop a cliff, seeing the malevolence build as soldiers fight each other to the death. Meanwhile, Alicia makes her way to the Highland Keep where General Landon is, but she is intercepted by Roland's soldiers. Alicia's forces hold them off, allowing her to go with Rose to take another route to General Landon. The two eventually reach the Highland Keep and confront the general, telling him to send an envoy to the Roland's camp to sign a truce, but the general refuses, saying that Chancellor Bartlow has given him full authority and orders his men to capture the princess. Alicia and Rose defend themselves while Sorey is on the battlefield trying to stop the fighting. The soldiers on both sides are tenacious. The Roland's forces are willing to lay siege on their own men, while the Highland soldiers fight their own princess to capture her. Losing patience, Rose eventually decides to stop holding back and takes out her daggers, but Alicia stops Rose and prevents her from killing one of the soldiers. This leaves Alicia open and one of the soldiers stabs her in the back. Alicia forgives the soldier, but Rose is angered by what they've done. Suddenly, a gust of wind pushes all the soldiers back and a seraphim appears above them. Meanwhile, Sorey is becoming fatigued by the endless conflict. Every time he thinks he has ended the fighting, more fighting ensues elsewhere. This cycle continues until he notices a large whirling cloud of malevolence and realizes that a human hellion is at its center. Unable to see his human form, however, he concludes that it must be the Lord of Calamity. Going back to Alicia and Rose, Rose comes up with a quick solution and leaps toward General Landon. She holds him at knife point and takes him hostage, telling the others to obey. The soldiers comply and send messengers out to the battlefield for a ceasefire. The Lord of Calamity observes the end of the fighting and walks away. Sorey, having noticed him, chases after the Lord of Calamity to purify him. But the Lord of Calamity easily deflects Sorey and expresses surprise that another shepherd had arrived. Sorey armatizes with his seraphim, fighting the Lord of Calamity with all his strength, but his level is not high enough yet, so they are easily beaten back. The Lord of Calamity decides to toy with Sorey and summons all the nearby Hellions to attack. In typical villain fashion, the Lord of Calamity walks away with his companion Simon as the hero fights the minions. He tells Sorey to survive to become humanity's beacon of hope, so that he may crush him later and cause the greatest despair. Sorey does survive, and after dispatching the last Hellion, he sees Rose approach him on horseback. Rose has been looking for Sorey and hopes that he can help Alicia, so Sorey heads back, heals Alicia, and watches over her throughout the night. When Alicia wakes up, they have a tender moment and Sorey asks Alicia to become his squire, but this requires a pact to be made and can be a heavy burden on Sorey. Nonetheless, Alicia agrees to become his squire, and Layla performs a binding ritual. With this, Alicia can now see the seraphim clearly. Later in the daylight, Alicia and Sorey meet with Rose. They exchange their goodbyes, promising to meet again soon, but are interrupted by a Hellionized General Landon. Landon's appearance angers Sorey as he is the one that nearly got Alicia killed. But just when it seems that Sorey is about to give in to malice, he composes himself and purifies Landon. With that, Alicia takes Landon to be put on trial and departs from the rest of the group. As they wave goodbye to Alicia, Rose asks Sorey for a favor, to accompany her to Roland's and help her with a deal. Sorey agrees, and they, together with the Seraphim, go on their next journey. Somewhere, Velvet Crow, a woman with black hair wearing rags and bandages, is facing two monsters in a dark pit. Velvet easily defeats and consumes both monsters with a demonic claw that extends from her hand, but soon after, she falls over and expresses frustration, thinking only about her revenge against one man, Artorius Kalbrand. After some time, the small grate of the pit opens up. A woman wearing a white butterfly dress and black visor descends, only to be greeted by Velvet smashing her face into the wall. The woman is unfazed and continues to calmly speak to Velvet. Velvet, however, says she cannot trust Artorius' Malek and demands his location. The Malek simply tells Velvet that they don't have much time and uses her magic to lower a ladder from above. Together, they climb up into the prisons, where they meet several soldiers known as exorcists blocking their path. The Malek's magic is deflected, but Velvet simply pummels the soldiers into each other with their demonic hand. The Malek then tries to lead them out the way she came, but Velvet takes them in another direction. Finding a storeroom to hide in, Velvet equips herself with some gear, which is still mostly torn. She also finds a large sword, which the Malek recognizes to be Stormhowl. The Malek tries to explain that the world outside has changed in the past 3 years, but Velvet only cares to know the location of Artorius, who is apparently in Logres, the capital of Migand. In a flashback, Velvet remembers being unable to save a child, whom Artorius sacrificed in order to birth the Malakim, and end the demon invasion with an organization of exorcists known as the Abbey. Velvet calls the Malek by her true name, Ceres, and asks why she is helping her. But they both hear a sound and take cover to hide. A man dressed like a samurai searches the room, and when it seems like he left without noticing, he suddenly appears behind Velvet and holds her at knife point. But Velvet realizes he is also an escapee, and the man lets her go, realizing that they are in the same circumstance. Ceres notices that the man himself is actually a demon, but when he catches a glimpse of Stormhowl, he claims the sword to be his partner and demands it is returned to him. Velvet uses the sword as a bargaining chip and convinces the swordsman to help with their escape. He agrees, and the three of them come up with a plan to release the prisoners and use them as a distraction while they board a ship. They find a level where many prisoners are held, where Ceres frees them, and the swordsman causes a diversion. Ceres and Velvet then make their way outside but find themselves on the roof of a tower. Undeterred, Velvet leaps off the tower and uses her demon hand to lessen the impact of her fall on the cliffside. Ceres simply teleports down. Once at the shore, they both notice a ship which bears the flag of a high-ranking exorcist. So they head along the shore to the docks, confronting the exorcists that land with the ship. Ceres recognizes the high-ranking exorcist as Oscar, who expresses surprise that Ceres would be a traitor and recognizes Velvet as the demon ear. He announces his intention to arrest them and charges at Velvet. Velvet and Oscar seem evenly matched, but Velvet tries to catch him off guard with her demon hand. Oscar skillfully dodges and counterattacks, knocking Velvet away. Velvet returns to fight, but Oscar starts talking to Velvet with a clash of ideals. Oscar believes that everyone has a role and that they must simply play their part, while Velvet refuses to live in a world that owes its existence to the sacrifice of her little brother. Their fight is then interrupted by a large dragon looming in the sky. The dragon attacks the exorcists on the dock and destroys one of the ships. Oscar and his men turn their attention toward the dragon in an attempt to fight it off. Velvet watches the events unfold and meets Magillo, a grand sorceress, who was sleeping on the ship that was destroyed. Velvet ignores Magillo and attempts to board the remaining ship while Oscar and his men attempt to bind the dragon. However, the dragon overpowers the exorcists and attacks Velvet. Ceres attempts to protect Velvet with a barrier, but both of them are knocked back through a large gate. Magillo decides to try and help Velvet using magic card tricks. The swordsman also shows up and helps fight the dragon, introducing himself to the sorceress as Rokuro. Meanwhile, Velvet and Ceres are on the other side of the gate, but Ceres is severely wounded. Ceres pleads with Velvet to consume her before she dies so that Velvet may inherit her powers. Without clearly stating her reasons, Ceres simply gives Velvet a comb, which once belonged to Velvet's younger brother. Velvet consumes Ceres and runs back outside, striking the dragon with Ceres' magic art. She then pins the dragon down and uses her demon hand to destroy it, causing a huge explosion. The scene then cuts to the 3 remaining prison breakers on a ship sailing toward Logres. The end. Check also our other videos. Thanks for watching.